Hello, my name is Paul Gilbert, and this is our sixth talk in our series of talks about understanding compassion and how compassion can help us in these times of difficulty, stress, and tragedy. And today we're going to be looking at emotions and how compassion can help us with our emotions. So once again, I'm going to share my screen. So click down there, and click down there. And there we go. Okay. So we're going to be looking at the nature of compassion, concept of safe relating again, and the idea that compassion can help us to change the world if we orientate ourselves to a compassionate motivation. So just to remind ourselves about something we spoke about in the second talk, which is that we need to understand motives and emotions are linked to what we call an algorithm, if A, do B. So for example, these are some that we spoke about, didn't we? That if a predator arises, then get anxious and run away, okay? If it's food, then get excited, salivate and go and eat. If there's a powerful giant threatening you, then you might need to submit. And if there's a sexual opportunity, then your body will respond in a different way. Okay, so these are called basic algorithms. And the one that we've been focusing on a lot is our compassion algorithm, about how a signal of distress can stimulate action within us to desire to do something about it. We also talked a lot, didn't we, about the functions of the mind, the 4 functions of the mind, the idea that there are motives, and for the compassion motive, it's the desire to be helpful, the sensitivity to suffering in self and others with a commitment to do something about it, and the desire to be helpful, not harmful. And we saw that that can be associated with a lot of different emotions. We've also thought about some of the competencies like empathy and so forth that can be very helpful to us in being compassionate, and different types of behaviors. So this gives us a sort of structure for the mind that allows us then to focus in on emotions. Now in our third talk, we looked at the autonomic nervous system and the way in which the sympathetic nervous system tends to be the activator of bodily processes that allow us to take action, to engage in action. So, for example, running away or fighting or getting excited about a wedding. Excitement and threat both use the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic aspect of the autonomic system, because it's arousing, isn't it? We need energy, activation. Whereas the parasympathetic system is a system that slows us down and helps us to ground and brings us back into balance. That's going to be very important when we think about how the autonomic nervous system and how the brain works with our emotions. So one of the questions as an evolutionist we always ask ourselves is, why do we have something? You know, why do we have a heart? Why do we have liver? Why do we have legs? Why do we have eyes? What are they designed to do? When we think of emotions this way, we can see that there are 3 basic things that emotions are designed to do. There are 3 types of body action that we need in different contexts. Now, one of those is, of course, we need emotions to stimulate the body and put us into a position where we can be attentive and act to defend ourselves, to run away if we need to, or whatever. And that is therefore to avoid or overcome threat. And we call that the threat emotions, or the threat system emotions. But we also need emotions that are going to excite us and get us out and do things, go looking for food and mates and so forth. These are activation, but they're associated with positive emotion, anticipation, excitement, and so forth. But there is a third set of emotions that's equally important, or very important, which are the emotions that arise in us when we are satisfied, when we're not under any threat, we're not rushing around going to parties or doing things that we enjoy doing, but we are in a state of settling. We're in a state of settling. And when we did all the breathing exercises, as we did in an earlier talk, this is part of the system that we're trying to stimulate. So we can describe these 3 emotions like this. That we have a threat system that's there to activate us, to defend us. And sometimes that system actually deactivates us, like when we get depressed or when we get frozen with fear, we can have a deactivation. Then we have the go out and do things, make things happen, go and acquire, consume, and so on. And those again are activation emotions, aren't they? And then we have a set of functions that are actually called rest and digest. This is very important because what it means is that at times when we're no longer under stress and we're not having to achieve or do things or rushing around or trying to make loads of money or whatever it is, the body slows down and goes into a rest and digest pattern. And the rest and digest pattern is a very important pattern for helping us to balance our emotions, balance our minds, and orientate ourselves for compassion. It's not the only thing, it's not the only system, but it's a very important system to begin to stimulate within us. And we can look at this in a different way. So here we are then, down at the bottom, we have the red system, which is for protection and seeking safety. And sometimes it can be about activating, but sometimes it can be inhibiting. Then there is the system for acquiring things, going out, wanting, pursuing, struggling, making lots of money on the stock exchange, excitement or whatever it is. But then there is the capacity for us to be rested within the body, to find a place of grounding within the body. And these states of mind also, if you do meditation, are very important because these states of mind produce a different type of brain activity. There's a capacity for slowing the mind, settling the mind is very, very important. We call these the soothing emotions. Okay, and these emotions play a fundamental role, stimulating these emotions play a fundamental role in regulating the other two. So this is called the three-circle model of emotion, or the three functions of emotion. Now, many psychologists will tell you, well, emotions are a little bit more tricky because a lot depends upon the culture where you are, how you express them. You know, the way you might express anger to somebody who's weaker than you might be quite different to how you express it to somebody who's stronger than you, to how you express anger to somebody who you love versus you hate. So there are lots of complications with this. So we don't want to overly simplify it, but this is a very useful way to begin to be thinking about the basis of our emotion. We've got these three types of emotions, and to become aware of what's going on when we're in the different systems. Okay, that's going to help us. So we can say I'm in this system or in this system. If I'm in the threat system, maybe I need to get into the green system. If I'm in my threat system, maybe I need to do things to stimulate my green system, my rest and digest system. I need to get my balance. I need to get my parasympathetic system working. Or sometimes, if I'm in the red system, then maybe I need to do things that are going to give me some pleasure, going to give me some excitement. Maybe I'm just exhausted and I need to be with friends that I enjoy being with and have some fun. Because sometimes when we're very stressed, we lose the capacity or the awareness that we need to have fun in our lives. We need to bring joy into our lives. So where you are in these three systems can be really quite important for recognizing how you balance them. And the other one, which is very, very important, which doesn't really fit into any particular system, is our capacity for grieving when there's a loss. Now, sometimes this is linked to threat, but sometimes it's also linked to soothing, that people can actually feel quite soothed after they've been allowed to cry and being able to grieve, particularly with support of others. So it's a tricky one, but it's a very important emotional state indeed. So when we're stressed then, and when we face setbacks, losses and traumas, we can be hit by three powerful emotions. Now this is important because sometimes people just focus on anxiety, whatever, but actually we say in the compassionate mind world, compassionate focus therapy world, you've always got to look for the big three. And the big three are anger, fear and anxiety, and sadness and grief. Now think about this. When we face a trauma or a disappointment, there's going to be a part of us that's really angry that that's happened. Why did this happen? Why did it happen to me? Okay. There can be a part of us that can be very angry about this virus. Why has it happened? Why hasn't anybody taken steps to protect us against these viruses? Why has God created a world full of viruses? Could be, couldn't it? But we can also have anger towards others as well. Whoops, gone too quickly. The second one is to do with fear. When we get hit by this, we can be very personally frightened, very worried about what's going to happen to us or the people that we love. So fear can also be a part of the trauma that we are experiencing. And thirdly, grief. So sorry, there's a capacity for us to feel great sadness and grief about what's happening. Now, the problem with this is, of course, the big three can play off against each other, because sometimes our anger suppresses our grief. Sometimes our grief suppresses our anger. And so it is always very useful for us to think about, so in this state of stress and upset, what is happening to my angry self? Where is my anger? Where is my fear? Where is my sadness? Okay, these are important things. So when we talk about stress, think about the big three. Always think about the big three, okay? Because that helps you. If you just focus on anxiety, that's one of them, but the other two can also be very important. And if we don't deal with those other two, they can cause us difficulty, actually. So let's have a think about this now. We said, didn't we, that there are these algorithms. Let's have a look at these algorithms in much more, a little bit more of a complicated way, a complex way, I should say. Because when we understand these algorithms, it can be really helpful to us. Now, the point is, as we've been saying all the way through, is you have a brain that's being built for you, not by you. Okay, so this is extremely important that you understand this, because you're trying to work out how the damn thing works, aren't you, really? Because you didn't design it this way. So beginning to understand how it works is a good few steps towards thinking about what you want to do about it. So let's take our issue of anxiety. So let's imagine something makes you anxious, maybe the fear of getting the virus, right? What's going to happen? Well, your body is going to react to that fear, isn't it? You might be tense, you might have an increase in your heart rate, you might get dry mouth, butterflies, you might feel frightened and afraid. So your body is designed to change in a certain kind of way when the anxiety system is come on. But it's not just your body, is it? Because also your mind becomes focused on things that are making you actually start paying attention to what that anxious thing is. You become narrow and focused on the danger. You scan, where is that danger? Where is that threat? You might see the threat as external to you or something internal to you. But it's not just your thoughts either, is it? Because there's also impulses in your behavior, okay? So you might want to just hide away and passively avoid, or you might want to run away. Or you might want to submit if it's a certain kind of, if you're being bullied by your boss or something like that. And sometimes we dissociate if we become very frightened. So why is it you do that? Because your brain is being designed to do that. It's absolutely not your fault. It isn't, right? This is part of your programming. When the anger system is hit, bang, this is what will happen. It's part of your programming. So one of the things we can do is learn to notice our programming, become mindful of it, and then make a decision. Maybe this is an opportunity for me to switch into my compassionate mind, to do my breathing, to do my focusing. Okay? Now, cognitive therapists will also tell you that if an anxiety hits you, bang, then the way you think about it, the way you attend to that anxiety can make it better or worse. Okay, so this is extremely important. And behaviorists will tell you that the way you behave when you're anxious, if you do a lot of avoidance rather than engagement, it can make you worse. So psychologists and therapists have studied this for quite a while, and we know that there are ways in which we can wind up our anxiety and we can try and kind of contain it. Now, containing doesn't mean getting rid of. Sometimes it means tolerating and working with and holding. And if you use your compassionate mind, as we will do later, you'll see that if you switch into compassion, you don't blame yourself for your anxiety, but equally you don't wind yourself up with your anxiety, you'll be able to begin to tolerate it. It's not easy. Anxiety is not designed to be easily tolerated. Anxiety is plumbed into you, built into you by nature to save your life. It's to make you run, avoid that lion or whatever it is, okay? These are very old systems in the brain. Okay, let's have a look at another one. What about anger? How does anger work? Well, anger works the same way. Something makes you angry, right? And this is your programming. This is how the anger system is programmed. You didn't program it like this. You didn't ask for it to be programmed like this. It just is. So when you get angry, then again, your heart rate will go up. You get flushed, tighten the muscles, okay? And what happens to your mind? Your mind starts focusing on what you're angry about and what they said and what you're going to say or whatever it is. You have a narrowing of focus. You focus on the transgression. You scan the environment. You might blame yourself or blame other people. You didn't choose to have that. It's designed for you, not by you. And what about your behaviors then? What happens when we get angry? Well, then we have aggression and we want to shout or be assertive, or sometimes we might dissociate if we become too angry. And of course, sometimes when people become angry, they can become violent. Okay, why? Because that is the programming. That's what's happening in your biological program. And again, as our cognitive therapists tell us, the way you think about things can wind you up or wind you down. So that's important, and we'll have a look at that a little later. But the first thing to recognize then is you have these algorithms within you, and they can really bounce you all over the place through no fault of your own. You can learn how to drive them, but it's not your fault the system works like this, it's designed like this. It is important though, because the more you become aware of your programming, how it works in you, how does anger work in you, how does anxiety work in you, get familiar with how you've been programmed, that will give you the opportunity to then shift into your compassionate mind as a way of steering your mind in a way that's more helpful to you. Now, there's an example we often give here in terms of anger. Imagine you go Christmas shopping and you go into 10 shops, and in 9 of the shops, the assistants are extremely helpful to you and they help you buy the present you want, and you come out and you're very pleased. And then you go into one shop and the assistant is chatting behind the counter, and you wait and you wait, and then you say, "Excuse me, could you serve me?" And they look at you and they say, "Patience, sir. I'm just talking to my colleague here. Just patience, one moment." And you could feel that anger rising. What do you mean patience? I'm the bloody customer, aren't I? What do you mean? And then when you give them the $20 or £20 or whatever, they give you change for 10, and you say, "Look, I gave you 20. And they say, "Oh, no, you didn't, sir. I can't tell you how many people try and pull that trick on me, but you definitely gave me 10. So now you really are in a rage, right? Who are you thinking about on your way home? And when your partner comes home that evening, who do you talk about? They say to you, "Have you had a nice day? What sort of day have you had?" And you say, "Yeah, not too bad. I got some presents. But do you know what happened to me in this shop? I can't believe it. I blame Brexit. I really do," or whatever you want to blame. And away you go. So now you have two people who are pretty annoyed and talking about how terrible it is, and people are so rude these days. Rap. We all do it, don't we? I've done it. Certainly I've done it. But think about this. Wasn't 90% of the people really helpful to you today? Wasn't 9 of those 10 people really good? They went out of their way to help you. Why aren't you ruminating about them? Because if you do, your brain and your body will be in a very different state than if you ruminate on the one that's made you angry. So why are you ruminating, going over in your mind about how angry you are and how you want to get your own back? One very good reason. Your brain is designed to do that. It's not your fault at all, okay? But the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we want it to do that? You might be justified in your thinking, the brain works that way, it's not your fault, but do we want to let it run its program? Do we? Maybe. But on the other hand, once you recognize, no, I don't. I think I want to steer my mind. So what I need to do is to say, okay, that person was a bit of an arsehole, I accept that. But now I'm going to remember all the helpful people that I encountered. I'm going to remember what I felt like when I bought this present. I'm going to remember the smiling face of that assistant who was as happy as I was when they found what I was looking for. Can you imagine if you do that? So the point about this is, again, see, learning to pay attention to notice where your programming is, remembering it isn't your fault, don't start beating up on yourself, but how do you want to steer your ship? How do you want to steer your mind? And compassion will help you. Okay, so these are really quite important processes to get your mind around that compassion will never blame you, but it will always try to help you. So when you have a spare moment, and do this when you have a spare moment, getting to know your anger program, okay, become a little bit curious like Sherlock Holmes, reflect on these emotions one at a time. Consider what your angry self tends to think, what it wants you to do, how it wants to control your behavior, to shout or hit out or whatever it is, how it feels in your body. If you spend time when you're just curious, you're not wound up, you're just interested thinking about your anger, and you don't blame yourself, right? Just curious about it, you can get to understand your programming. And that might be associated with a whole set of beliefs and ideas and ways of thinking. Whatever it is you discover is what you discover. Or you might discover you're a little bit trigger happy with your anger because you're kind of physiologically a bit trigger happy. Whatever it is, you are discovering your programming. Then the idea, right, if you're doing this exercise, to let go of your anger and then turn your attention to your anxious self. So sometimes when I was working with aggressive guys, they say, I don't get anxious. So then you think, well, supposing I got anxious, if I did get anxious, right? Consider what your anxious self thinks. What is your anxious programming or your anxious self wants you to do? What typical urges do you get when you get very anxious? How does anxiety feel in your body? When I was a young person at boarding school, which was quite a frightening place, when I got anxious, I always had to go to the loo, right? And immediately I got anxious, I would be off to the loo. So understand how anxiety works in your body, and that allows you to discover your programming and what happens in your body and what your anxiety wants you to do, okay? And now you can switch to your sad self and do the same again, right? So you're understanding, getting familiar with, in a non-judgmental way, how it works, how you think, what's happening, what are your behaviors. So your compassionate wisdom really recognizes that our emotions can be extremely tricky, right? Some people will be very angry because they might be losing their jobs. That's pretty scary, right? And there will be both anger and fear and sadness about this. It's not just one set of emotions, okay? Some people might have had to cancel their wedding, lost people they love, and many other tragedies. The thing about it is, if we are in charge of our programming, then we try to ensure that we have safe relating, okay? Because we can direct our anger at the situation, other people or the government. Very tragically, you know, people from China and other places have been beaten up because they've been, you know, blamed for this horror that's happening to us now. Sometimes some of our medical staff, clinical staff, nurses and so on, they've been shouted at and so forth by very angry and upset relatives and so forth. Very understandable, but the key for us is that there's not a safe way of relating. If we have anger, then it's really how do we regulate our mind so that we can have our anger, of course we can, but not do it in a damaging way to others. And that's going to be very important for us as when we follow compassion. So then on top of that, then we can become angry about being angry. I don't want to be angry. And then we end up thinking, oh, okay, so that's all understandable. It's not our fault. It's not your fault. But the question is, how do we actually want to be? If we were at our compassionate best, how would we want to be with that anger? Recognizing that that anger can be very powerful, but how do we want to be with it? And you know, it's the same with anxiety as well. And it's the same with grief. You know, we got a lot of grief in the world right now, huge amounts of grief. You think of all the tragedies and sadnesses and the losses, not just from the people who have died, but from all of the things that have happened as a result of the lockdown. Extraordinary amount of grief. The Western society is not very good with sadness and grief, okay? A lot of our movies and films and entertainment, it's all about, you know, aggression, you know, dominant males mostly who, you know, you have these bad guys who do bad things, and then the James Bonds and Schwarzeneggers come in and they sort out the bad guys. We think, that's the way to sort the world. No, it isn't. We are confronted by life, which is always about tragedy. In the end, we all die. In the end, everything we love passes away. Famous Buddhist view about the world. Dealing with grief is one of the most fundamental emotions that we can deal with, and understanding that grief should be partly shared, okay? We share our grief with others. So this is very important, and we work through our grief, because the time when we can cry is a time when we can allow ourselves to share. And to be honest with you, it's easier for middle-class people like me, but for the less fortunate and the job insecure, all of this is deeply tragic, and helping to understand the grieving that's involved is important. So now we have to consider how our anger, grief, and fear can be used wisely and productively for the future. And that means to insist that we must never go back to the kind of world we come from, of such inequalities, of such neglect of our services, really, not only the health services, but the police and social care, really quite shocking, losing 150,000 beds in the last 10 years. Wow. That the viruses have always been major killers. So we have to use these emotions that we feel, not just to operate them in the present, but how can we use them wisely to give us the energy to say, we have to change our ways as a species, as a nation, as a person. We have to change our ways. So it's fascinating then when we start to look at the emotions that are going on in us, the big three, we suddenly realize that we've all got these different programmings going on in our minds, and sometimes they get mixed up. So slowing down and just focusing on each in turn can be very helpful. So those are the threat emotions. What about the positive emotions? And these are doing things that bring us joy. Okay, so sometimes it's very easy to forget that we also need to focus on things that bring us joy, to go out and do things which are important for us, that give us a sense of achievement. Okay, and once again, you can think about what happens in your body when you do things that give you a sense of achievement. What happens when you get excited about things? You look forward to things, okay? Here again, you have activation, your heart rate can go up, you have pressure to act. And if you get really excited, like you're gonna get married tomorrow or something, you can have problems sleeping. I know I didn't get much sleep the night before my wedding because I was just kind of excited, you know. What about attention? Now here again, you are programmed such that when you activate this system, it will take control of your attention. You keep thinking about it and so on. Imagine, for example, you have got your wedding coming up. You probably won't be able to think of much else. And supposing you do a lottery and you win the lottery and you're worth millions, you won't be able to stop thinking about it for quite some time. Even if you want to sleep, even if you say to yourself, I need to get some good sleep because, you know, I'm very wealthy now. The chances are you won't be able to, because when you're lying in bed, you keep thinking, I'm rich, oh my God, I'm rich. So the point is then that these are all built into these programs, and we need to learn how to steer them, how to get control over them so we can steer them in a way that's helpful, not harmful. And of course, when you are excited, you do all kinds of stuff like approaching other people, engaging with them, socializing, celebrating, and so forth. So that's an interesting question, right? Because if we're going to bring balance into our lives, we can certainly recognize the power of the threat system, and there's certainly the big three, and how it can control our minds in ways that aren't always helpful. But we also need to learn how to control our minds such that we can build our positive systems. We can bring joy into our lives, okay? And that means noticing at times the small things that bring us joy. It's very easy not to notice the small things, isn't it? Like maybe the first cup of tea of the day, or, you know, if we're rushing, you know, we have our breakfast, we just gulp it down. We don't really notice what we're eating. We don't really notice the joys. We rush out. We don't really notice the beautiful sky above our head or whatever. So slowing down, learning to slow down as best we can, such that we do our breathing in the morning and we ground ourselves. We just focus on paying attention to what's going on around us and focus on the small things that we enjoy. The small things that we enjoy, because they actually just go past very quickly. Now, Rick Hansen, who's written a lot about this, has said that our minds are like Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. And the Sunday Christmas shoppers was an example. Positive things flip through the mind very quickly. Unless we hold on to them, they flip through the mind very quickly. Whereas the negative things, we're much more likely to hold on to negative things and remember negative things. Not your fault, remember, not your fault. But do you want your mind to do that? And by learning to pay attention to things that are positive, that give you a little bit of joy, just a little bit of joy, really hold them for as long as you can, this will have an impact on your brain. And you make it a habit to notice the good, notice the good, notice the good, okay? It's just a habit, okay? It's very easy to notice the bad things that make us angry and threaten us, but learn to notice the good, because then you're taking control of your programming. And also notice there's a difference between meaning and pleasure, right? Doing things that are pleasurable is extremely important, but not if it's at the expense of others. That's important. Don't do that, of course, obviously. And also notice that sometimes we'll do things positively because they're meaningful. For example, supposing somebody has invited you to a great party and you're looking forward to it. That's when we get out of this lockdown, of course, and we can go to parties again. But then a friend phones you up and says, I'm terribly ill, I'm really ill. I know you got that party, but I could really do with you coming over and helping me because I need your help. What would you do? Well, the chances are you'd be a bit disappointed, but you'd go and see your friend, partly because, you know, in 6 months' time, when you look back on your behavior, you will feel rather better at having gone to help your friend than having said to your friend, sorry, I can't be bothered, I'm going to the party, right? So sometimes doing things that are meaningful to us is also very important for us positively. But when it comes to positive things, one of the things that is important is to savor. Now, when you do mindfulness, as we'll do in another talk, learning to savor your sensory experiences. For example, if you're eating, learning how to pay attention to the foods you're eating, the taste you're eating, the textures and so on, and we'll come back to that. So stimulating your positive systems, taking control to stimulate your positive systems, because that's very good for your brain. That's very, very important. And now we come to rest and digest, okay, which is one of the key balancing systems. And here again, this is about settling, allowing the body to settle and bring the body back into balance. Now, when you run into this system, or this system is activated in you, then you will experience a slowing, okay? You experience your heart rate will become lower, your blood pressure lowers, you are reduced action, you're not wanting to take action. You are grounded in your body. You can use this for sleeping, although the exercises I showed you earlier are really to help you stay grounded and alert, not to sleep. But you can use this for sleeping, doing those breathing. And notice what happens to your attention, okay? With your attention, it starts to become open. It's what we call safe attention. Your attention opens up. When you're anxious, angry, it closes down and focuses. And if you're focusing on something that you're really enjoying, like getting married or winning the lottery, again, that focuses it. But when you're in this system, your system opens up your attention and you're able to think more creatively, you feel safer, you're more explorative. This is a very different way of paying attention to the world because you're not trying to achieve anything or do anything, you're just experiencing the world from a position of feeling relatively safe and open. And then your behavior becomes, again, you might want to approach things or do things. You might even be playful, okay? You're not trying to achieve anything or do anything. This is a grounding, it's a balancing system. And once again, it's very important for us to think about how will we stimulate that system? How can we develop this system? How can we grow this system? How can we build this capacity for rest and digest in our body so we can experience grounding, feeling safe in the world, okay? Because sometimes we do really need to practice these things. So just to begin to wrap up then, through no fault of our own, this virus will stir up emotions big time, okay? So it will help if we first recognize we are all in this boat together, and many people within states of high anger and high anxiety and so on. We can be understanding with that and work out how to be helpful. And sometimes that's not easy to know, is it really? Equally, however, just like the virus itself, we don't want to contaminate other people with our anger or frighten them with our fear or upset them in ways that are not helpful. So this is really important. Safe relating is about all the issues I have in my mind is not going to be, I'm not just going to dump them on people and use other people's as punch bags or whatever. Yet, this is important, we need to share and turn towards others. it says top there, doesn't it? I shouldn't say that. I should say turn towards others. We need to share our stories. We need to come together, and we will need to come together for grieving at some point. Like Greeks understood that. They understood this. The whole issue of the tragedies was to come together to grieve for the state of the world. And this is very different from just dumping on people. Right? Sharing is not the same as dumping. Sharing emotions is about our common humanity. And that can be sharing our angers and our fears and our griefs. So we want safe relating. So the question is how to do all of these, share all our emotions safely with our anger, and compassion will help us. If we bring our compassionate mind to my emotions, but also bring our compassionate understanding to yours, then together we will be able to work with these very difficult emotions in a compassionate way. So that is the end of my talk today. Here's a few books that you might be interested in, and we'll see you again for our next talk, which will be on mindfulness.